Hi, I'm Mike Egger, the owner of Everywhere Legends Video. First of all, I want to start out by thanking you, the wrestling fan and customer, for purchasing this DVD. Normally, I'm the voice that you hear behind the camera, but for this DVD, I wanted to do something special. On September 20th, 2012, my best friend and business partner, Dan Mitchell, passed away from a massive stroke at 40 years old. Everywhere Legends was started out by two people having a dream. Me and Dan burnt countless tires and put thousands of miles on the odometer going up and down the highway capturing road stories from some of the biggest legends that pro wrestling's ever produced. This production is the first DVD that we have filmed after his passing. So it is only fitting that this DVD be dedicated in honor of the memory of my best friend, my brother, my business partner, one of the biggest belt marks that I ever met in my entire life, Dan Mitchell. This was a project that Dan would have loved. Dan loved the championship belts, and he had a tremendous amount of respect for Dave Millican as a man and for Dave Millican as a businessman. So without further ado, I want to thank you, the wrestling fans and the customers, for allowing me to do this, and for your continued support through this very difficult several months that we have endured. Today, the dream continues. So without further delay, Everywhere Legends is proud to present to you Turnbuckle Tales, told by Dave Millican. I hope you guys enjoy this as much as we did filming it. Thank you. Welcome to another installment of our Shoot Series Turnbuckle Tales. Today we have one of the world's premier championship belt makers, the ace of belts himself, Dave Millican. How you doing, Dave?
Good, man.
Well, let's get right into it. Let's take it all the way back to the beginning. Tell me a little bit about your childhood and how it was growing up for you.
Yeah, growing up, I think really it's probably that way for everybody. Wherever you grew up, if you're a wrestling fan, then that was the greatest wrestling in the world. And it's not any different for me growing up here and just outside of Memphis, Tennessee. I mean, that was it, man. Wrestling was my big brother was actually the wrestling fan in the house, and I kind of in cycles. My brother and I have always gone in cycles like this. He would introduce me to something, and then he would drop it, and I would take it to an extreme, and that's kind of what happened there, and not with wrestling, and then of course with the belts.
How many siblings do you have?
I have two brothers.
Well, I bet that was something for Mom and Dad Millican, wasn't it?
Yeah, two brothers, and we're out in the South. We were out in the sticks, and we just only had 3 channels, so we did a lot of fighting, a lot of wrestling,
a lot of impromptu wrestling matches.
Absolutely,
I'm sure.
Absolutely, man.
What age did I mean, this silly question, but what age did you become a fan? There's one thing about flipping the channels and seeing it and paying a little bit of attention to wrestling, but what age was you just hooked and you just drawn into it?
Yeah, I was probably in and out of it all through my childhood, and then then probably up to I want to say probably around 12 or 13 years old, it really hooked me, and at that point, then there was no turning back, and it was. I watched, religiously and started keeping up with it all, not just in Memphis, but all around the country. At first, in the earlier years, I mean, it was just for me, it was not magazine stuff. You get up on Saturday morning, you watch wrestling, that was that. But later on, it got to be I would buy every magazine I could get my hands on and all that kind of stuff, which is not that uncommon. I mean, you really, for wrestling fans, you want to keep up with the territories. Then probably in I want to say 82, something like that, we started getting all this syndicated stuff in with Dallas and Mid-South and all this stuff come in later. And I mean, so, the WWF, it just opened up a whole new world for me.
Well, who were some of your favorites growing up? Some of your favorite wrestlers at the time?
I was a big, it's Memphis, man. You got to be Jerry Lawler fan, right? Which, strangely enough, Jerry's a friend of mine, but strangely enough, as a kid, I hated Jerry Lawler. He was a heel, and he was so good at it that when I was a little kid, you didn't like the bad guy.
That was his job.
That was his job.
He did a great job at it.
He was excellent at it. My brother, on the other hand, was already a teenager. So my brother and his friends idolized the guy because Jerry was like one of the original cool heels that like the teenagers idolized him. You know, it was cool to be like Jerry Lawler because he was always insulting somebody and had the big mouth, but such a sharp wit. You know, so you know all week long they'd be wearing out the Jerry Lawler lines they heard on Saturday morning. But I hated him at the time, and then I got to be a little older and see, you start seeing, I guess the guy's pretty cool.
Who are some of the other ones?
Oh yeah. I mean, all the main Memphis guys, man. You know, Bill Dundee, Jimmy Valiant, Dutch Mantell. You know, I mean, all these guys, Austin Idol, and funny enough, I know all those guys now, and a couple of them have even worked for me back in when I was doing shows and stuff. So I mean, it just kind of come full circle when you got Bill Dundee, who's just a legendary guy, and one of my favorite guys, and Bill Dundee's on your card, or Jimmy Valiant's on your card, and not that Jimmy needs any defending from me, but a lot of people who only saw the boogie woogie man persona, which was nothing wrong with that. I mean, he was over and he sold a lot of tickets with that, but you don't really understand the Jimmy Valiant we grew up on. I mean, he was just ferocious. I mean, this guy was not only was he sharp as a tack on the mic.
Oh, one of the best. Absolutely.
This guy was brutal. I mean, you're talking bloodbaths and stuff. So those guys were, and then of course we started getting the other stuff in, and then I started buying the magazine and stuff. I mean, I'm following the Von Erichs. I'm Von Erich fan. Got to know Kevin a little bit, and got to meet Kerry once, and I mean, so I'm, pretty much any of those big name guys that you're talking about from the '80s, Ric Flair. All the world champion guys, from Briscoe to Bachman. I know it's a generic answer because I'm naming everybody, but I did.
That's what it's about, right?
I just loved all those guys, man. I mean, because I respected so much what they did. As you get a little older and you start learning about them and stuff. I mean, the heels and the babyface thing. I don't say it goes out the window because those guys did their job. They were good at it, but Nick Bockwinkel was a heel, but he was a consummate heel. I mean, and a classy champion, classy guy, one of my favorite people. A lot of times, by the time I was a teenager, Nick would come to Memphis to defend the belt, and everybody's booing Nick. Not me, man. I'd go over there I'd go out to watch Nick make his entrance. With the big diamond-studded license plate he called it. So. I was just all over the place. I could see, I'd see my guys, I'd see Lawler and Idol and these guys every week. So when the World Champions come to town, I try to go over and get a look at them and the belts and all that stuff.
Well, and we'll talk about kayfabe, a little bit later as far as, once you got into belts and stuff. But,
right.
Talk about kayfabe when you was a child. It's almost like believing in Santa Claus, so to speak.
Yeah.
And talk about, you and your brothers and kind of when you started realizing, that it was, more of a show. And
yeah. The bug never really, to call it the bug never really bit my little brother, my younger brother. He would go to some of the matches sometimes just because I was. And
something to do on a Friday, Saturday night.
On a Monday night in Memphis, you can sit at home or you can go to the matches with with your brother. So sometimes he would do that, but it never really bit him. My older brother, with everything was just in and out. He would be a fan for a while and then he'd move on. We did that with everything from wrestling to Kiss. My brother was a big Kiss fan, and he dropped it, and then I took it to an extreme. Man, I was a big Kiss fan.
Kind of had that flavor of the month club there.
Yeah, exactly, and that's my. Matter of fact, my brother's still that way. But as far as kayfabe goes, I think it kind of went out the window. You kind of knew if you'd ever been in a real fight, and we've been in quite a few of them. So I think you knew that when you got a 200-pound guy, a 250-pound guy throwing a punch, and you don't see the impact, you don't see you don't see any result of it, or
a red mark,
all the cuts, or all the little gig marks are on the forehead and that kind of thing. You kind of start picking up, but still, even then, these guys were so good at it, so good at what they did. They would always make you just suspend your disbelief.
They knew how to tell a story.
They knew how to, exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
The storytelling was there.
A friend of mine, a guy named Kelly Mayfield, who started in the belt business with me. Kelly Mayfield had a saying that was pretty accurate for around here. And he said, you know, if we went home on a Monday night and Jerry Lawler was a Southern heavyweight champion, then all was right with the world. And it's like, you know, it's, and it sounds so funny, and people can't imagine being that passionate about it without being, you know, these days if you're that passionate about something, you're a goofball because they tell you it's a work, they tell you it's a show, and so you know, but we didn't. They protected it ferociously. I mean, you could say it was fake all day long, and people did. But even my dad was, oh, I want to go watch that mess. I don't want to take you down there before I can drive myself. I don't want to take you down there and watch that stuff. Then when he would take me, he would sit there and he would go.
Oh yeah, he was into it.
Flinch with the punches. You know,
Absolutely.
Steve Kern. I told Steve this because Steve's gotten to be a friend of mine over the years. Steve Kern could get my dad wrong. I mean, my dad was such a Steve Kern fan, just because Steve was so good at what he did and so believable. That my dad, who didn't want to go to those fake wrestling matches, would sit there and watch Steve Kern throwing those haymakers at Norbert Austin, and he would.
Like say, you know, he's yelling at him. Hit him again. You know, I got a father like that.
Exactly.
You know, one question, you know, that I've always wanted to ask you. You know, you got little kids and they're watching wrestling. A lot of them, you know, inspire to be wrestlers. Did you ever have any of those things, or did you just really just kind of lock in on the championship belt part of the business and just kind of stay there?
Yeah, when I was probably 12 years old and stuff, I thought it'd be the greatest thing in the world. But, you know, there's a DJ in Memphis that says this. He said, you know, on Monday nights I wanted to be Jerry Lawler, and on Friday nights I wanted to be Gene Simmons, and I think that was probably me. But then, you know, very quickly that turned into just a love for the belts. I mean, you know, man, I'm 5'0". I'm, you know, it really wasn't even about that. Even when I got into the business itself and ran shows, I never wanted to be I was realistic. I was a businessman. I was realistic. Little old me ain't gonna be the guy selling the tickets. Okay, so what I wanted to do was I took the Jerry Jarrett approach, and that was on a obviously very much smaller scale, but let's do what's best for business. And that was always me. And so even probably by the time I was in my mid-teens and stuff, I never really thought about being a wrestler. I just loved the belts and wanted to be close to the business.
What drew you to the belts? I mean, you know, what drew you to that part of it?
It's funny because I've never really paid any attention to them, and I've kind of retroed that and gone back and loved some of the really old belts. But I just Jerry Lawler and Dutch Mantell feud over a Southern heavyweight belt, and one Saturday morning that belt caught my eye. And I mean, the belt wasn't even exactly brand new at the time, but something about it just caught my eye, and that just, I was like, you know what, I need to make one of those. And so then I started, then here we go, you know, I'm looking around for whatever I can, you know, living out in the sticks, you don't have any money, you know, so you're just, and not only that, you're just a kid, you know, 12 years old, 13, whatever it is, I don't know, so you just start making them out of whatever you can find. And fortunately for me, though, my dad worked in a junkyard through all that time, and so you get all these neat, you never even think about it in those terms really, but you get all these neat little car emblems and things like that that you can mount on a plate. And my uncle, actually I had two uncles that worked in a road machinery place, and they had these big sheets of steel. So I started with literally cardboard with aluminum foil wrapped around it, and some of my brother had a paint by number set that I rated the paint out of, which is not ideal paint for that, but I made it work. You know, and from there. I mean, my uncle was looking at some of the stuff I was doing, and he said, there's a better way, man, we can do better than this. And he said, draw me a template, cut the template out of cardboard, like you're doing now.
What age are you at this time?
You know, it all runs together, man. I want to say probably 12 years old.
Wow, so,
you know,
young
and then
kid.
by the time and of course by the time my uncle got involved, I'm probably 13, 14 years old. And my uncle says, there's a better way, man, we can do better than this. And he says, draw me a template on cardboard and come to work with me. And what my uncle would do is he'd wait till the boss was always there in the mornings, and by lunchtime he was gone. So I would just hang out. I would work with my uncle. I'd help out, do a little bit around here, you know, whatever. And then when the boss was gone, he's like, okay, get this sheet of steel out, draw my template out on it with some soapstone, cut it out with a torch, sand it off, polish it up. Boom, I had me a wrestling belt plate.
Oh, wow.
So between that and my dad raiding the seat covers at the junkyard, so I had all the pleather and naugahyde I could use. So, you know, I mean, and you know, those things were hideous. But
how many did you make? I mean, several?
I have no idea.
Were they? Did you ever make any of your own original belts, or
I
were they
did.
copies of?
No, I did because I had to. Because with what I was working with, you couldn't really replicate everything the way you wanted to. I mean, you could try, and I did. My dad actually has the only one that I still know where it's at, a Southern heavyweight belt that I made, and it's hideous. But it's at the time it's what I had to work with, and my
You
dad.
was a kid too. I mean,
Yeah, my dad keeps it on his mantle.
That's very cool. That's awesome. You know, you talked a little bit about some of the belts you made, but obviously you were doing some that were good enough to get the catch the eye of Reggie Parks. So explain how you started. A lot of people, and me myself, wouldn't even have known how to get a hold of him if I wanted to.
Right.
So kind of explain that.
That actually was not. I probably made it a lot harder than it was because I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. But before then, what happened was I discovered the world of what around here we call outlaw wrestling, what probably most of the rest of the country calls independent wrestling. And these guys loved the stuff I was doing, because some of them had no belts, and some of them had even worse belts than I had, and I could kind of, by this time, I got to a point where I could kind of, with the stuff I was working with, I could replicate a Memphis-looking belt.
And they were affordable,
sure.
Obviously.
Sure. And I'm actually getting ahead of myself. Mr. Guy Coffey, who for years was over the auditorium in Memphis, and then kind of became Jerry Lawler's, gimmick guy for that's just what he did. He handled the gimmicks of the merchandise. Now it'd be called a merch guy probably for Jerry Lawler. And I used to buy pictures from Mr. Coffey and his wife. All the belt pictures, I've still got them right in this very office. We got probably a few thousand of those same pictures in these photo albums that I've got. And so in doing all this, they're like, "Well, you only buy the belt pictures. What's up with that?" And so we talked a little bit, and this is why I make these things. Well, let me see them. So I would bring them in. Mr. Coffey's typical businessman, smart businessman. He's like, "Sell some of these?" And I was like, "What kind of money can we get for them? I don't want to give them away, but if we can make some money." And he said, "Well, obviously I'm going to make some money, but you're going to make some money too." So we sold a few of them right off the gimmick table in Memphis.
Wow.
And those were ones I'd love to have.
How much were some of them going for?
We did $200 or so.
Wow.
And obviously, that's you're not gonna do that constantly because it's Memphis and it's you're talking $3 or $5 wrestling tickets.
And probably a lot of the same crowds.
Right, but these guys, some of these people would say, "I can't buy it this week, but can you hold that for 2 weeks for me?" And then they'd come back and they'd get it. And so Mr. Guy Coffey actually kind of was probably the first belts I ever really sold. Was through that, and then from there, some of the outlaw wrestlers probably picked up on them and stuff. But I was, by then I'm getting old enough that I got jobs and stuff, and the jobs just not that much different than today probably, but it was hard to get anything going around here. So I went in the Army and doing all this now. While I'm doing all this, I'm still making belts, and I just keep them. I'm keeping my stuff, and so I see a belt I want to try to replicate, and I'll do it. And gosh, I would hate for anybody to even see them today. But at the time, it was kind of my fix. It was my way of, it was my hobby. It's what I did, and then that was that. When I came back, I was stationed in Germany for pretty much my whole tour, and when I came back, I got a little better at it. I was doing pretty good. And I would show them to. I'd take them to the matches in Memphis again. Mr. Coffey picked up on it, sold a couple more of them for me, and then I started getting the attention of guys like I remember one time Jerry Jarrett, Eddie Marlin were walking together. For those that don't know Memphis wrestling, I mean Jerry Jarrett was our Memphis wrestling promoter. Eddie Marlin, was a matchmaker, and they said, "What you got there?" And and they had all the belts they needed and stuff, but I mean, it caught their attention, and they were willing to stop and talk to me about it. And that, for me, that was pretty cool. So from there, Mr. Coffey though would just he would say, you need to show Jerry this, or you need to do that, and he would say, "Oh, he's just right back there talking in the dressing room." Man, I didn't belong back there. I didn't, I wasn't. I wasn't comfortable with that. And Mr. Coffey had gotten so used and so comfortable with me that he was like, "Well, he's just right behind that door, man. Go on back there. I'll tell him you're gonna." So he kind of hold my hand, not literally, but I mean, he would just kind of hold my hand through that process until I got eased into that,
And I could see at that age, Jerry Jarrett would be kind of intimidating,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, and it's funny because going, when Jerry Jarrett was still involved with TNA and stuff. I mean, and I got to talk to him in Nashville. I went up and did some belt work for him and hand delivered stuff because it was just in Nashville and all that. But I mean, Mr. Coffee was kind of more connected with Jerry Lawler, and so he would say, well, Jerry, and Jerry would like this, or Jerry would, and he kind of introduced me to Jerry Lawler, and that's how that all really got started. And I mean, to me, the first work I did that ever got any attention was the work that I did for Jerry Lawler, which is really just fixing up old belts more than making anything. And from there, we'll get into the Reggie Parks thing, but I would ask, it's funny because Jerry was the guy that said, well, Reggie Parks makes our belts, except for, Memphis, typical Memphis, they had some homemade stuff, but the really good stuff were Reggie Parks belts. And I seen Reggie's name in the magazines, as, the Bill After magazines, and they do the Where Are They Now and stuff, and I saw a couple different little blurbs over the years about Reggie Parks, the championship belt maker. But I didn't know if that was current or if he was making the stuff in Memphis. And Jerry said, no, he makes it, and he flipped one of the belts over and showed me the stamp on the back of the leather, crafted by Reggie Parks. And I said, could you put me in touch with him? And Jerry said, yeah. I said, I got his number in my book, but it's at home, I don't have it. And this went on for a while. And his son Kevin later kind of smartened me up to something. And he said, I don't know this for a fact, but he said, I think my dad was probably just kayfabing you because he didn't want you showing up at the matches with a Reggie Parks belt that was all brand new and shiny, looking better than your beat up ones. And I was like, ding, and like involved, I was like, yeah, that's probably true. So what happened was at one of these independent shows, by then I knew, you see the black velvet bag, you know what's in it, it's a Reggie Parks belt.
absolutely.
And so I'm at one of these independent shows, and I see a guy walk in, black velvet bag tucked under his arm. I made a beeline for him, and I said, hey man, can I see your Reggie belt? He looked at me kind of funny and said, how do you know it's a Reggie belt? I said, man, I know that bad. Nobody else did the black velvet bags with the black velvet bag with a white cord hanging from it, and you can see the shape. It's Reggie Parks' belt. So he was impressed that I even knew it, and he gave me Reggie's number, and I called Reggie, and I had no intention of ever trying to work with Reggie, or I would never. Reggie was so far above everybody else. I would have never insulted the man by saying something like that.
Was you just wanting to buy one?
I just wanted to buy one. I just wanted to have a Reggie Parks belt. And by then, I'm not a kid anymore. We've jumped around, but I mean, by this point in time, I'm in my 20s, and I just wanted a Reggie Parks belt. And I'm making my own belts through all this. I've got belts being used on local shows and all this stuff.
Pretty good business going at this time.
Yeah, hit and miss. Nobody had any money, and I mean, it's because these little shows that I'm talking about. I mean, these guys weren't drawing flies,
Were you selling any to the fans at this time still, or like a custom order type thing?
Yeah, we had gotten into the guy I mentioned earlier, Kelly Mayfield. We'd gotten into this little business where we had had access to make these. It was kind of like a fiberglass. We just call it plastic. I mean, but it had this gold or silver coating on it, and he could CNC the artwork. And he was a pretty good artist with the computer, and he could CNC this stuff in. I would put it all together, do all the other work. We'd share the painting and that kind of stuff, depending on what the job was. And we were selling those. We got to where we were selling those pretty good. And I was doing that. We were doing some of those, and trying to let this all run together here. But anyway, when I finally got Reggie's number, because there was no website or anything back then,
Right.
Absolutely. So I got Reggie's number. I called him. I probably talked to him 2 or 3 times about the belt I wanted to order, and I sent him the check, and we were talking, and I said, I would be embarrassed to show you, but I do this too. I make my own belts, and I sell them locally and that kind of thing. And he said, well, I'd like to see them, and I said, and I think he was. I've always said that he was probably just being nice, but that's Reggie, and he's just one of the nicest men. One of the nicest, most humble guys you could ever meet. And he said, I want to see him. He said, mail me some pictures. He sent me some pictures of what you've done. So I did, and talked to him the next week, and I wasn't even going to bring it up. and he said, I got your pictures, man. That's a lot of potential. You do good work for what you're working with. He says, why don't you do this like I do it? I'd love to.
Yeah, right, exactly, absolutely.
But
yeah,
and that started the whole thing, you know, and why he picked. I could not have been the first person to have ever sent Reggie Parks a picture of their homemade belt.
you're right. I'm sure. I'm positive.
I'm actually putting Reggie over here, not myself. I don't know what, you know. I mean, I even asked him years later. I said, well, why me? What was it? I couldn't have been the first guy that sent you a picture of a belt they made. And he said, no. But he said, you know, I'm not going to be around forever. Which, I don't know about that. I think you'll probably outlive me. He's still in pretty good shape. But he said, I'm not going to be around forever. And he said, there needs to be somebody that's honest and it's nice to people who's going to keep doing this and it's going to do it the right way. And that was that as far as getting started with Reggie Parks. And he kind of walked me through it. I mean, at first I didn't deal directly with engraving companies and plating companies and that kind of stuff. Reggie started off, and Reggie would get plates made for me, and he told me, for all the things that I said about Reggie being a kind-hearted person, and he is, he did tell me he takes his craft very seriously, and he told me early on, he said, now, I like the pictures of your work that I've seen, but I'm going to send you, you know, we're going to hook you up, you get some orders, you get the business in, and then I'm gonna get you some plates to get started. And he said, I want to see your painting. I want to see your leather work. I want to see detailed pictures of this stuff. And he said, if I don't like what I see, then maybe you just go back to doing it the way you were doing it. Of course, you know, at the time, now it's like, well, big deal. I'll get on the internet and I'll find somebody myself. Well, it was a whole different world back then.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he wanted to put a little bit of he wanted to put a little seriousness behind it. And
Well, he wanted to make sure. I mean,
he wanted to make sure I was serious.
make sure that his product was going to go.
And he did exactly. And he was going to attach his name to it. That's instant credibility, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And did you guys? So you guys are working out of two different areas.
He's in Tucson, Arizona. He's in Tucson. That's where he's still at. He had moved there from Florida after Reggie traveled all around the country as a wrestler, and then he had ended up in Tucson. That's just where he wanted to be, and that's where he retired from the wrestling business at. And, or I guess he actually probably retired in Florida and moved to Tucson. But I'll edit the language a little bit. But I mean, he had a great quote for it about the leather in particular. And he said, "Son, if you had the Mona Lisa, you wouldn't put it in a crappy frame, would you?" How much clearer can it get?
Exactly.
And that was the and then from there, of course, my business started picking up to the point that I was handling my own orders, and he kind of turned me loose, and we collaborate on some stuff now, and he helps me, I help him, whatever we need, because we're just like, I mean, he's like my second dad. I mean, he's just my mentor. No, I've said this to many people. I'll say it, even those people in this business that aren't smart enough to give Reggie the credit, there would be no belt business without Reggie Parks. If Reggie Parks hadn't created the things he created, who ought to give a crap about it? There wouldn't be a belt business.
In those early days, did you have to go to him and have some on the job training, so to speak? And
No. I had copied just by looking at the belts that I had access to. I had kind of copied, and I was still a far cry from it. But I mean, I was trying to teach myself, and that's something else too about Reggie. And there's misconceptions out there about Reggie Parks, taught him, and he did in his own way. But it was a trial and error, and he never really. He would, if I asked him a question, he never misled me, or I take that back. He did once as kind of a rib, I think, but it was something I was just being stupid about, and shouldn't have even had to ask him anyway. But anyway, I mean, it was just a trial and error thing. I learned by looking, and then he would see we'd get together, because we're all across the country from each other. We'd start doing these conventions and stuff, and get together, and there'd be some of my work there and some of his work, and he'd look at some of my later stuff, and he'd say, "I was wondering when you were going to pick up on that. I was wondering when you were going to learn that." He wanted me to learn it. He didn't want to hand me everything, and he handed me enough, and he sure handed me some credibility. And I think we were talking on the phone, and we were talking about the fact that you pulled something off the internet, off of my site, my own web guy, who's a great guy, and just started that site for me as a fan site, and I liked it so much, and was so impressed and just humbled by it that I was like, I need a site. Can we just make that my site? But I've been so connected with Reggie for so long that that's the misconception out there. I sometimes get credit I really don't deserve when it comes to making belts for WCW or World Class. It's like I was a kid when those belts were made, or most of them. I mean, maybe not some of the WCW stuff, but I was a kid when a lot of that stuff was made. But I've been connected with Reggie for so long. I've been replicating those belts for people all over the world for so long that sometimes people just run
You get connected to that.
People
Yeah.
run that all together and think that I made it and even people that are, you know, on the internet that are reputable people think that, but I don't ever want to mislead anybody or anything like that. I mean, the classic belts were Reggie all the way, and I just was blessed and fortunate enough to be the guy that he chose to you know, continue that on and carry it on. And of course, the wrestling business evolved and changed, and not necessarily in a good way, so that there aren't really all those powerhouse territories anymore. But you know, I mean, it's just, you know, I mean, it's just. I'm really fortunate that he saw something in me and gave me that shot. I mean, could I have made belts without him? Would I have probably kept making belts and gotten better and by now be making the etched belts and all that stuff? Sure I would have, because it's all out there. Then again, it's a lot of what's out there is his fault and my fault, because we were naive to opening the door up for everybody else. People would ask questions, we'd answer them. How do you do this?
Well, at one time, didn't you offer belt videos and stuff?
The belt video, it's funny because, you know, I mean, I take these belt pictures on everything from my love seat and my couch to one point in time in the last house I lived in, the steps, and the guy that did the page for it thought it'd be funny because I had belts on steps, and he said step by step Dave Millican belt video, and he was just being funny with the wording, and people started, oh, step by step he's gonna teach us how to make a belt, and it was never like that. And you know, but we did answer questions freely and out there, and so I mean, the whole process was just given away, and we were naive to that. Honestly, not to throw a stone, but Reggie much more so than me. By the time Reggie would just.
Well, and Reggie was old school too, and he probably didn't see, just like everybody, even the promoters at that time, didn't see this whole new market that was slowly getting built and created. You know,
Reggie's just it sounds terrible to say. Reggie's probably at heart just a nicer, you know, I don't want to say a nicer guy, but he's just so generous and such a, you know, he's not really overly suspicious of people. And for somebody in the wrestling business, that's odd, but I mean, you know, they've been in the wrestling business so long, but I mean, Reggie's good natured and wants to believe the best in people. And
very trusting guy.
Sure, and people want to ask questions, and he would tell them, and I mean, next thing you know, they're popping up everywhere, and gosh, I mean, now it's just kind of, there's belt makers everywhere, some good and some legit guys, of course, and unfortunately, many more that are not.
Oh yeah. There's a ton of them. We'll talk about that. You know, what was the first belt that you made? Do you remember under Reggie's direction of the first product you put together?
You know, I truly don't in terms of who it was. I remember the style was an Intercontinental style belt, like the classic Intercontinental, Reggie Intercontinental style, but it was not a WWF Intercontinental. It had been customized, and I truly don't remember who it was. Maybe some small company that come up with the money and wanted a real belt,
Right.
and that was, I think, from what I remember, that was the first one.
Here's one that I'm sure you will remember, because you're making belts for these smaller promotions. The first big promotion and the first belt that you made for them.
You know, again, that's so connected to Reggie and stuff, but I think, I mean, for
Not necessarily a promotion that you did a lot of work for, just the first belt that, you know, said, hey, you know, you need to send this over.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when we started getting a lot of attention, wasn't even American stuff, it was Japanese stuff. Some of, you know, some of these, and of course I made belts that made TV and stuff before then, but I mean, you know, some of these IWGP belts, and they would spend outrageous amounts of money.
Oh yeah, and those belts were gorgeous.
So they wanted, yeah, so thank you. So they wanted to blow you out of the water. So I mean, even though I've been in the business for many years, I think probably those started getting people saying, "Wow, this guy is doing more than just, you know, he's doing more than just an old, you know, Texas heavyweight title or a Southern belt from Memphis or something. This guy's, you know, and he getting really elaborate with the stuff. But that's because, you know, they wanted these very impressive, expensive belts, and I've been around for so long that I made belts for companies all over the place. But I mean, as far as really starting to feel like we were getting attention and that it wasn't all necessarily pointed at Reggie, that was probably some of the early stuff. And then by the time that You know, like I mean, believe it or not, as many years I've been making belts, because Reggie and WWE or WWF at the time had a breakup in '96, and I had only been working for Reggie a short time, I must have a couple of years or something like that, but Reggie called me in an uproar, and to get Reggie riled up is something pretty hard to do. But Reggie called, and I was like, I don't care if they call you, don't make anything for them. At the time, it's not like I had a boss or anything, but out of respect for Reggie and
your mentor,
Absolutely, I'm still that way. And so it's one of the few times Reggie ever laid down the law. Says, I'm through with those guys. If they call you and they want something, they're not getting anything. You hang up on them, you tell them, and he was hot. I mean, so that was that, and I thought, well, there goes my shot to ever make their belt. They actually didn't call me back until about 5 years ago. This year will be 5 years ago they called me back to start working for them again. Because, the guard had changed. Back when Reggie was doing that stuff, I mean, he'd get a call from different people in the office. I mean, Jay Strongbow, the classic Green Deagle belt, stuff like that. I mean, and the whole structure changed. You had office people who don't know anything about belts, ordering belts, and they're looking on the internet for people. And that's where they found me. That they'd already, they had contacted our business partner Ed Schumann, who kind of, when the internet took over and created a site for Reggie, and kind of Reggie's still to this day not an internet guy, So I mean, somebody handles all that for him. He's not gonna. Well, they handle it for me too, but I'm on the internet. I have tons and tons of emails every day and that kind of thing, and Reggie just didn't do that. But anyway, they found me on the internet, and but they had talked to Ed Schumann a couple of years before that, and Ed's gone now, and Ed was I loved Ed, and Ed would be the first one to admit Ed could be abrasive, and Ed kind of ran him off. He's like, we're not marks, we're not gonna, if you want this business back with us, it's gonna be this way, and he was kind of laying down the law and telling him about how it was gonna be, and he kind of scared him off probably, and so then they contacted me individually and said, let me ask, if we do business with you, are we doing business with them? And I said, well, however you want it. Doesn't have to be, no. I mean, I do my own stuff. And, I do mostly my own stuff. And so they're like, well, in that case, send us some samples of the work, and if it's what it looks like on the internet, we got a deal. And by the next week, we had a deal. I mean, again, though I'm making belts for people all over the world, it's just been in the last 5 years that I went back and started doing WWE belts. I mean, I've had, I was doing belts for TNA and stuff like that already. But, I mean, as far as the big as it gets, the WWE.
The big mainstream.
Last 5 years.
How did Reggie, how's Reggie with that? Is he cool with that now? Did the fire die down, so to speak?
Water under the bridge. He was glad to see the business come back, and he was glad that it was, I think for him, it was probably a real changing of the guard in the sense that he'd done that. He'd done that. He was the guy that those classic designs that people that I still replicate today, those classic, he'd done that, and he still does it for that matter. He still replicates.
And it keeps that art form alive.
Yeah, yeah, and so when they come back, and I don't think Reggie would want the. It's a lot different. Back in those days, you get somebody like the chief would call you and say, make me a belt where an eagle kind of takes over the main plate of it. Well, it's a lot different than that now. I mean, you're talking, we want the leather this
more detail.
We want the leather 6 inches wide here, and then 2 inches down we want it 4 inches wide, and then you're talking specs. And I don't think Reggie wants to deal with all that stuff. He laughs at me now and shakes his head at what I'm doing. But it's like any other business. It's evolved, and that's what it's evolved into. And I don't think he has a desire. And if I ask him to help me with something, I'm sure he would. But I don't think he has a desire to have to deal with that, because Reggie's a true craftsman. I tell people all the time that want a Reggie belt. To this day, he'll still make you a great belt. But if you're looking for something maybe that was from 1984 or 87 or 92 or whatever the year is and stuff, if you want it exactly like that, he's a craftsman. He's going to do it the way he looks at it right now and wants it to be. He'll try to honor the customer too and do what he can to match it up. But that's where being a belt mark probably benefits me. It's, I remember that stuff better than he did. We laughed for years about it. That I would have to remind him of how he done something, because he did it and he moved on to something else.
I want to back up just a little bit. You were talking about making some of those belts, for overseas and stuff, and And just a few years prior to that, you were basically, probably a little bit more than just a few, but you were in the metal shop with your uncle, and
Right.
so how cool is that? I mean, at that time when you're actually, you see all the hard work and your dream. I mean, it's materializing right in front of you.
My uncle passed away about, gosh, I guess about 10 years ago now. And before he passed away, and we had a little distance there. I mean, we didn't live that far apart, but I'm busy with my life and been all over the world and all that stuff. But I did get to go back and just, it's not like it was that far, but I mean, I did get to visit with him and stuff before he passed away, and showed him some of the stuff that I had and some of the stuff I'd done. You know,
And I bet that was a proud moment for him too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's, something that you guys have, together regardless.
He was, my uncle really, and it's probably something I've never really said because my dad was a big help too, but my uncle, my dad was just a busier schedule with his job and stuff. My dad would work crazy hours and stuff, and my uncle would always make time for me, and when it come to belts was no different, and he's the one that spoke up and said, we got a better way of doing this, we're going to cut it out of steel. I never even knew he could do it till he brought it up to me. So yeah, but it was cool. I got to go back, and he's seen some of the real deal stuff, and knew that, I guess for lack of a better way of putting it, he knew that I had made it. That it wasn't just something I did for fun anymore. I really made a job out of it.
And this is something that has taken you all over the world. I mean, at least your products, anyways. At least the belts.
My travel all over the world with military stuff. But yeah, but my belts definitely, absolutely. I've got belts this week that'll ship to Australia. Last year I shipped belts to Russia. I frequently ship belts to Japan, Canada. I mean, they just go England. They go
worldwide.
Well,
and you ever have it's maybe a silly question, but because we all have projects that go awry, but you ever have a project that was, whether it be something that you just couldn't get right, or something that you couldn't get right between you and the company that you was working for? You ever have any issues like that?
The best example of it's probably something I can't talk about yet.
So something in the future. Then.
Yeah. It's not that it's gone awry. It's just
deadline issues and
deadlines are constant, man. That's something a lot of people. I get this a lot. Oh, it's so great! You get to do something you love, and you get to work for yourself, and it is. I mean, that's a blessing. That's something that is a fortunate thing. But sometimes I long for a job where I get off at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock and I'm done. I don't get off work. I mean, if it's on a weekend, even if I'm not working on belts, then there's emails, phone calls. Which, poor pitiful me. I mean, it's not that bad, I guess, but there's not really time off. If I'm on an anniversary trip with my wife, well, she's just come to accept that there's a certain part of the day where I've got to do emails and stuff. You can't take thousands of dollars from people and not update them if they ask you a question. They start panicking. Even with my reputation, it's like, okay,
right.
This guy's not getting back with me. So I mean, I never really get off work, and it is a job. And that it's funny because my wife used to get very defensive. This kind of opened up for me. After I left the Army, I worked in corrections for about 5 years. All during this time, I'm doing little belts on the side here and there. I mean, I got the thing where I started working with Reggie actually while I was still in corrections, and the internet hadn't taken off and stuff. So I mean, it's just sporadic. I mean, it's not like it's killing me or anything. And but my wife, when I left quote unquote real job, and I dabbled in the wrestling business and all that stuff, but people would just kind of just scoff at it. It's like, oh, we don't want to work anymore. He's just, and my wife would get hot. I mean, she wouldn't tolerate it, and she'd say, he don't want to work anymore. There's times, he's doing 24 hours in a row to finish this stuff. He'll sleep 3 or 4 hours. He gets up, he does 24 more, and he'll want to. I mean, and sometimes it got to a point where it was they would do it just to rile her up, and I was like,
Well, she sees it too.
Yeah, and I'd say, they're just pushing you. Some of them were.
She's got a front row seat to it.
Yeah, they're just pushing your buttons. I mean, because it'd be an easy way to set her off and get her. But she was very defensive about it, because I guess from the outside looking in, if you don't know what I'm doing, it's like, oh, well, that's the dream job. The guys just
you're right.
But I mean, I can tell you that I did that overnight. I worked from yesterday until about 6:30 this morning. I slept for about 3.5 hours. I got up, and then I'm gonna do that again tonight.
Well, the biggest thing is you don't have a job where you can blame somebody else. I mean,
Yeah.
if there's a screw up or a deadline issue, I mean, you take it.
And there are always screw ups because I mean, I hate to say it that way. I mean, but for lack of a better way of putting it, there's always issues. I mean, there's nothing. It's just handcrafted, man. It's not gonna be perfect, and there's always things. I get sometimes there's a plating flaw and it's got to be sent back to a plating company to fix. I do some plating here, but I always get at least up to a nickel base from my plating company, and I mean there's some stuff, and they do good work. It's not that, but the volume we do. You're not going to make a living in this business without volume, because the profit and we haven't raised prices in years, and the profit margin is getting smaller all the time because the material costs are going up.
Oh yeah.
And there's always something though. I mean, this is not a perfect process. Anybody that's getting it expecting, I mean, you're going to get good work. That's why we're here talking.
Exactly.
You're going to get good work, but a lot of people don't understand that the wrestling business, the even today the sports entertainment business, if you will. I mean this stuff's not under a microscope. If it looks good on HD television, it's good. These things are going to get beat up anyway. But you have people that don't want to crease in the leather. Well, unless I'm going to ship it to you in a box this long, we got to roll it in the. Sometimes some people are going to be impossible to please, and those people I'm just fortunate enough to have reached a position in my life I don't really have to deal with.
And that's any retail business too that's dealing with
Sure.
those issues.
Sure, dealing with people, period.
Exactly.
And I've just reached a point in my life where I'm fortunate enough that, and I'm not arrogant about it because it could change tomorrow. I mean, I don't have a huge ego about it or about my place in life but I've just reached a point. I've been in that position for several years now. I don't have to deal with you because whatever you're going to pay me, I don't have to have it. It's so. Fortunately, I deal with many more good people than bad people, and people that understand that, and just were kind of like me and as widespread as the belt business is on the internet. It's amazing. I still hear from people all the time that say, "I had no idea I could get one of these, and it'd be real."
Oh yeah, and you hear that a lot at shows too.
Sure.
I mean, I remember, we were both at a show in Paraguay together, and I remember a lot of the people gathering around you when you were walking through.
Right.
What'd you have? It was the old NWA tag titles,
Tag belt, yeah.
Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express.
When I went to see our friend Bobby Eaton, I had those belts with me. Our mutual friend Bobby Eaton, who's just a great guy, and I had to have those belts with me, and I had to show Bobby.
And to see him mark out on them was cool, because he did,
Yeah.
And I took a lot of pictures of that, and he was in all of them. And those were those the same belts that he held, or was those replicas that you made?
They were cast from the ones that you made. I was.
And I got to be careful with that word replica too, because all your stuff is cast from the molds,
That's what it
right?
is. There's different levels of replicas. You got mass-produced replicas, which are factory-made belts, and I make a lot of the master copies for them to work from for those. I had a guy a couple weeks ago emailing me, and he got back and forth. He really couldn't decide what he wanted, and I said, "Look, man, I think by the amount of money you want to spend, I think you want a replica and stuff." And he comes back with this book of an email about about how it's like, I don't know why you think I'm stupid. I know you hate those replica companies. Hate them? I mean, as long as it's something that's licensed to us, and not everything is, but as long as it's something licensed to us, I'm making money when they sell those replicas. I love it when people buy the replicas. I don't have any. There's just different levels of. I was trying to make the guy understand, and he was insulted. I didn't, but there's different levels of collectors, like there is with everything. I don't care if you got guys that are shade tree mechanics that have old beat up cars that's a project car that to them is gold, and then you got people that are buying Ferraris. It depends on what your level of collecting is. And it's the same way with belts. Some people don't want to spend the money it takes to get a real belt. That doesn't insult me at all. Some people absolutely just can't afford it. That doesn't insult me at all either. Again, I'm not arrogant about anything in this world we live in. When it comes to money, I might be in that position tomorrow. I mean, that's just how the world works now, unfortunately. But I mean, I don't. There's just different levels of collectors. I'm not insulted by and what I do, if I'm replicating a classic belt, it is a replica. It's just the real version of it. I mean, it's the fortunately one great thing about being associated with Reggie is, I mean, we got 40 some odd years of artwork of classic Reggie belts. Not everything's been kept. Some things over the years have been lost or just used to the point that they have to be recreated. But I mean, you know, I'm not insulted by the replica tag at all, as long as people understand what
The difference.
Sure.
And the levels.
Sure. I mean, Javier Cortez is just a tremendous guy, friend of mine who does my website. Back when he was, he's kind of out of the belt thing now. And he really just does that for me. But he, I want to say he was outside Madison Square Garden, and he was handing out business cards. This was years ago. I mean, and the replica belts had already come out, and you got these guys like, why would I pay $1,200 for a belt? I got this one for $300, and look at it. And he would try to tell them, and these guys would get hot. I mean, he's got to get mad, you know. He's trying to tell them, it's like, what you got is something stamped out in the factory that's doesn't have the true detail of the real belt.
Cubic zirconium.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, if you think about it, yeah.
Right. And so I mean, he finally got it. I think he finally just and I told him, I was like, man, don't waste your time. The ones that want the cards or something, that's great. And I'm just you know, honored that you would do that for me. That you're out there in New York City handing out my business cards and stuff. But anybody that's you know, anybody that's that closed-minded about it, it's not ever going to be our customer anyway.
Exactly. How much restoration do you do? You do a lot of belt restorations?
You know, these days, a lot of that stuff has been snatched up by what I haven't had, my friends have, and so I've done a little bit. Some don't want them touched, no matter how bad they are, and some want it. You know, it's kind of like I'm the American restoration of belts, so I've done a lot of it. You know, everything from touching up, and I didn't have to do anything to take away the history of these belts and stuff, but everything from the gigantic North American belt, I've touched it up and brought it kind of back to life years ago. If you remember that one, the gigantic Bill Watts belt.
Absolutely.
I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, the belts from Texas and some of those that I fixed up. And I mean, I've done a lot of it, and it's something that you have to be, to preserve the history in it. You have to be very careful with what you're doing, because you don't want to just start replacing stuff on it, or you kill the history. So you just gotta bring it back to life without, you know, without taking away from it, taking the original parts out.
It's not be so invasive.
But you have people that, like one of my friends who's the biggest collector I know, and he just kind of a private guy. But I mean, he unless it's falling apart and needs to be bolted back together, he don't want you touching it. You know, he likes he likes it exactly as beat up as it was when it, you know, when it a lot of people are that way, and then some, you know, feel like, can you at least shine it back up for me, because I want to be able to display it and have some pride in it. And some people, the pride is in the fact that it's all beat up. It just, you know, it's like anything else. You got people that are just going to have different opinions on it.
You know, you told a story off camera that I really enjoyed, and I'd like for you to retell it if you would. We were talking about the AWA women's title.
Yeah.
And I'd like for you to explain that, and that was one of your restoration projects.
Yeah, a guy brought it to my late partner Ed Schumann and said, if you'll make me another belt for it, then you know, you can have it. And Ed didn't really know what it was exactly. He just knew it was an old Reggie belt, and he knew it had some kind of history to it. And he sent me the picture and said, do you recognize this? You know, is this one of Vern's real belts? And I said, yeah, it's one of Vern's real belts. And I said, actually, even though it says light heavyweight, it was really primarily used for a women's title. And, you know, Sherry Martel, Wendy Richter, Medusa, you know, all held this belt. And by the time that I see it, it's been sprayed. The leather has been spray painted black. And I remembered that in the 80s, even passing through Memphis once, Jimmy Backlund, Jimmy Del Rey had the belt, same belt. I recognized it and the leather had been painted like baby blue. So this got all this coats of paint on the leather. And when I get the thing, and I figure, well, there's not really much I can do to destroy it. The history's, you know, kind of faded on it anyway, because nobody even recognizes it anymore. Because it had originally had this beautiful red, white, and blue Reggie strap on it. And the Reggie strap was still intact, but it was just painted over so many times and just very crudely painted over. And I thought, well, I got nothing to lose, so I took it apart, preserved all the original parts. I mean, the backing leather, all the stuff, everything I could save, I saved it. And I bought a vat, and I put some paint remover in the vat, and I took a soft brush and I just started kind of brushing away the layers of this paint. And I didn't really expect to be able to ever even find the red, white, and blue under. I figured it all kind of blended together by then, but I guess because of all the years that it stayed with that true red, white, and blue color, I was able to just kind of peel the layers off of it, and then when I get to the red, white, and blue base of it, which is faded really bad, but I can still see it. Then when I know I get it out of that little harsh chemicals as quick as I can, and a little soap and water, and clean it off, and just let it sit and let it dry. And then basically I just restored the colors to it, and I just polished the plates up. I didn't do anything to really take away history on them or anything. I just polished the plates up. I put it all back together and brought it back to life where people looked at it and knew exactly what it was, because it had gotten to a point where nobody even recognized it anymore.
Wow, and where is that belt right now? Is one of your friends still has that time?
Yeah.
And you get a lot of those belts too, don't they? Some, we don't have to go into any of the stories, but don't you get a lot of your babies back, so to speak? Don't a lot of them come home and they kind of pass through?
Yeah, I don't. I've always said, I'm not a Dave Millican mark. I'm a Reggie Parks mark. So like if something comes back that I worked on or I made it, it's kind of cool to see it. And I've done restorations on that stuff too. But to me, the cool stuff is the stuff that I was seeing on TV. Where we were, you and I both were probably seeing on TV.
Oh yeah,
kids,
absolutely.
And that's the cool stuff you get a hold of. And even if it doesn't need restoring, that's the cool stuff when it comes back. But yeah, it's always cool to see ones that. I mean, I finally I used to laugh at Reggie about he would say, I don't remember that belt, and then when I reached that point, I now laughed at myself, because sometimes I can't honestly say that you can put something in front of me that I don't have some recollection of, but I have reached a point where I've made so many belts that if it's in a picture or it's at a distance, I don't know necessarily if I made it or Reggie made it. I mean, it's case by case. Sometimes I do, but I mean, if you're talking just so many belts over the years that. I mean, I can't laugh at Reggie anymore, because sometimes until I'm right up on top of it, I don't even know anymore.
Do the companies, when you send a belt over to a company, whether it be the WWE or TNA, do you have any kind of a contract on that belt to where you'll keep up with restoration on it, or does it just get to a point to where they just basically retire it?
No, as a matter of fact, I just chose, because of some dealings that I wasn't really happy with TNA. I just chose to stop dealing with those guys, and they still have my tag belts, and they have another belt maker who is a reputable guy, no problem with him whatsoever, but restore the tag belts recently because they looked so bad, they've been beat up, and they're just notorious for not taking care of their belts. Unlike get into a little bit of the company business here, but unlike WWE, who generally has more than one of each belt, they didn't do that, and the guys were just really harsh on them. And I pride myself on putting together a good belt, but it was kind of embarrassing. You got guys anywhere from 200 to 250 pounds, whatever, swinging from belts over the ring, and then they break bolts, and then they want to call and say, "Hey, this plate's coming off." Well, yeah, it's going to do it next time too. When you're
you're just hit a turn post,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
And on some of those belts, you just said a little bit about the WWE and how they do things. They've got multiple belts. They got the kind of explain that they got the TV belt. And
Yeah, generally, I mean, and sometimes there's exceptions. Like sometimes there's even more than that, and sometimes occasionally there is just one of a belt. But that's usually if it's something that they think might not be around much longer. They're going to change design or something. Generally, they like to have at least two of each belt. And then they got there's a road belt, and then there's what they just refer to these days. It used to just be a belt, belt for TV. Now it's called the HD or high def belt, because you're going to have one that's going to look good for TV. And we're in the process right now replacing some of the ones that the wear and tear is catching up to, and it's time to do that. And sometimes they'll even stockpile a couple, and so that they can go in and pull it without having to come back to me and wait the time out to get something made or refurbished. So I mean, and I get some of those back too. Sometimes they come back and they'll just say, "Can you fix this one up?" Which is a system that Reggie had with them for years. They'd send Reggie a box of belts and say, bring them back to life. I've actually in the shop, I've got a couple of old cool. There's a plate back by between the last side plate and the snaps on a lot of the classic Reggie belts. We call it a logo plate, and I've got actual Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior logo plates that Reggie. When I first started working with him, Reggie would take them off the belts and they'd send them, and send them back. And he said, "I used to just throw these things in a drawer. Now I'm gonna send them to you." And he said, "I know you think they're pretty cool."
oh, that is sweet.
So I've got stuff that came off the original belts. Useless trivia, but it's just something that adds to my my redneck heaven junk pile out there.
One of the things that I always wondered, histories behind these belts, individual belts, and and you may not have directly had a hand in this, because I believe it was somewhere in '98 the WWE brought out their first ever hardcore title. Was that 98, 2000?
Yeah, everyone's
Was that an old belt? And if it was, what was it? You know?
Yeah, it was just one of the Winged Eagle belts.
Just an old Winged Eagle.
Yeah, WWF. You know, which we've always laughed. There was a guy out there that I can't think of his name right now, but and when if he sees us, he's going to be he's going to be offended by that because but there was actually a guy that came up with that Winged Eagle. I never saw an eagle without wings, but I mean that Winged Eagle thing was just something that stuck that the belt mark came up with. And but anyway, that's all it was. And on one of the old Saturday Night's main event shows, Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, had taken a hammer and literally smashed one of Hogan's Winged Eagle belts. And a lot of people thought that was the same belt.
And that's why I asked to
but
exactly.
it was not. That actually has been bounced. That belt.
So that's something they just smashed up and did on purpose to.
Yeah, and they were going to throw it in the garbage. And a guy who was one of the ring announcers, Mel Phillips, took it home. And then some of his stuff got sold off, and it's been through the hands of a couple of collectors. And a friend of mine has that belt right now. Actually, one of my good friends who we trade belts back and forth. He lets me, if I want to see something, I got some stuff here right now. As a matter of fact, that I say, hey, no, let me check that out, and he'd send it to me. Likewise, he knows that anything I've got's his too, and so that's in his hands right now. But the hardcore belt, back to not to ramble off on that too much. The hardcore belt was just a belt. They decided to do this thing, and so they had some of the belts, and they just took one and they smashed it and wrapped some duct tape around it, and there you go.
You make them for customers?
I won't.
Because I know there's a lot of the other
I've
companies
been
that
asked,
will.
believe it or not.
Because you're basically selling a piece of crap.
Yeah.
If you think
Well,
about it,
here's my standard answer on it, and it's true. If you want to pay the money for the belt, and then you want to take a hammer to it, that's your business.
Yeah, and
I'll make you the belt,
and you'll include the free roll duct tape.
I'll throw it in.
Exactly.
I'm not going to, and it doesn't bother. I've been asked, does it bother me that they did that? Not at all. It's job security. When they beat the belts up, and in some ways I'm glad they're rough on them. I mean, just because I don't want guys swinging from the ring and then whining and complaining because they break bolts loose and have plates hanging off. But as far as the wear and tear on the belt, I wouldn't have a job if they didn't. I guess I would with the collectors, but I wouldn't have a job with the companies if they weren't rough on belts to a degree.
Oh yeah, because they'd be getting decades out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the NWA World Heavyweight Belt, the Dome Globe belt, the belt lasted for years, man. Toward the end it was looking pretty rough up close, but there was one belt. But nobody at the time was hanging that belt over the ring and swinging from it.
A lot of the boys ever, inside joke, rib you and joke with you about how heavy you make the belts, just playing with you. Because, they're carrying these things all over. And that's the one thing that you always hear about. You always hear about them talk about is they hated carrying them. A lot of these guys,
Yeah, I've heard it repeatedly. Some of the old Memphis belts, like what we call the Southern heavyweight style, and at one point in time, most of the territories had them. The old Reggie oval belts were very light. The things probably weighed 4 or 5 pounds tops, and maybe not even quite that much. And the guys, if they were going to have a strap, that's one they wanted to. It wasn't very heavy, so when you're all over the place. And then later on, most of these guys are traveling by car. When you get to the airports and stuff, forget about it. These guys don't have to lug the heavy stuff. It's been a joke with some of the people I deal with at WWE about, this so and so complained. It says, this belt's heavy. I said, well, bless his heart. Tell him that when they bump, he's only making $1 million a year or $2 million a year. If he needs to, why don't you just hire somebody to carry it through the airport for him?
You ever have a rush job? Maybe something that got lost or stolen or misplaced or whatever the case, and they needed a belt. Just ASAP.
I'm really trying to. We've done so many super duper rush jobs. I don't really remember if that's been the instance on any of them, but that is actually another reason behind some of the WWE leading the way. They don't want to just have one belt. God forbid something happens to it, and that's the only one you got. Especially if it's one of your main titles. What do you do?
Oh yeah.
So that's the goal, and so that's why generally the talent probably has one that they're carrying, but then there's also the prop guys handle them and keep up with them to prevent the old days. If you had one belt, it was gone. And these days it's like at worst case usually there's a backup.
Is there still a deposit system in place? And there's not.
No, because and that is actually one of the things when I started dealing with WWE again. I mean, they would tell me, it's like, and I won't name names, so and so lost, air quotes, lost another belt, because it just I don't think actually that they ever had one. The NWA had one, and
Wasn't like $5 or $10 grand or something like that
I
at
think
the
it was
time.
actually, believe it or not, I think it was actually 25 grand. But
25
generally,
grand.
that was the host promoter. I think more likely put that up than the guys. I mean, let's just say hypothetically that Eddie Graham's guy was going to win the belt or whatever. Then generally, I think a guy like Eddie would put the money up, or Jim Crockett would put the money up, probably more so than the guys. And it was a deposit, not just to protect the physical belt, but also to ensure that when it's time to do business, time to drop the belt, the guy was going to show up and do business, because otherwise he forfeited that money. It truly was a deposit, and it came back.
Or did it magically end up on somebody else's show?
Yeah, and you really do that with the NWA because they blackball you. But yeah, it's there was a time when after the Medusa trash can thing, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Medusa dropped.
And go ahead and explain it a little bit if you would.
Jumped to WCW and dropped the WWF women's title in the trash can on Nitro. And there was a time then when WWF at the time, the guys couldn't get, when they would come to us. I remember the deal got to be where we couldn't even make a whole belt for the talent anymore if they asked. Like we could make a main plate and they could put it in a shadow box. We even had some of the guys ask, about shadow boxes and stuff. But we could make a main plate, but Vince McMahon had said no belts of mine are going to show up on anybody else's show again. Ended up in a trash can. So if somebody that had won one of the titles wanted it, we could make a main plate they could hang on their wall in a shadow box, but we couldn't make a whole belt for them. And I say we because even though those were Reggie belts, I was in the business at that point with Reggie, and so I remember full well that coming around and being that was the deal. We couldn't make a whole belt for him.
Was there any change of business when Ric Flair did the same thing and brought what they referred to as the gold belt over to WWF?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask about that, and the story's changed a little bit. But the deal is Rick said the belt was his personal property, and they really, it was questionable and proven otherwise. He said it was that particular belt was a gift from Jim Crockett, and he'd never gotten his deposit back on being NWA champion, and the belt was his. But they finally, and I actually forget the deal, but I know that WCW ended up getting it back. And I think they reached some sort of settlement on it, and Rick said if he was paid X amount of dollars, he'd just send it back, and that's how that happened. But Rick himself told the stories, and that's the only reason I know it. But Rick said that when he called and asked about coming to work for events, and one of the things he told him, because it was that big of a deal back then, instead of just a random prop. It was that big a deal. He said, "I got the belt," and Vince said, "Oh, you do?" Yeah.
Bring it.
Yeah.
And didn't he start carrying the tag title once they started blacking it out, and there was a big hubbub about it?
There was a belt that was made it was a Rush type thing, and it was the shape of the tag team, and it was really just so Rick would have a physical belt, and they would blur it on. And some of the pictures got out anyway, but generally the thing was to blur it so that you couldn't really tell what he was wearing. But instead of tag team, it had like 3 stars or something over where it would say tag team.
Kind of like an indie belt.
Yeah, it was a real Reggie belt, but it was just something to get him through. And then Reggie actually made him a modified version of a big gold belt that didn't have the artwork even remotely like the real one, but it did have the shape.
Was that enough to stir
problems
back and
forth? The purpose it served, what it did was it gave Rick a belt that resembled it to the random people. You know how many people don't pay attention to belts? I know plenty of wrestling fans couldn't care less about what the belts look like. And so for those people, it's like, oh, he still got the belt. There it is. And even though those of us that pay attention to that kind of thing look right at it and it's like, that's not it. But it was just served that purpose where Rick could still be the real world champion and have a big, impressive belt, and then it wasn't quite the Rush job that was done. And a lot of people think that belt originated, the one I'm talking about, in WCW, the remake belt, because it was Rick's personal property, and Rick took it back to WCW and done a real world champion angle with it there. Kind of in reverse, he took the Reggie belt there and did the real world champion angle because they already had the original belt back at this point when Rick went back. And so it just kind of served that purpose. At that point, I mean, Rick held on that belt for years, and I think the story is that he actually gave it to Triple H during his run.
I heard something about that
yeah,
too.
Yeah, I think that's the one he gave to Triple H.
Explain, we talked about kayfabe when you was a kid and understanding it all. Explain when you started getting into the belt business with Reggie Parks. Did you have to go through certain amounts of kayfabe to still, even though you're not you weren't a worker or anything like that, but to still protect the business when you're dealing with? Because I'm sure you were probably getting questions and hammered with questions.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a separate thing, really. It was never really an issue, By this point in time, I mean, it was just a separate thing. The wrestling business and the belt business were separate. I was talking to a promoter just the other day who says, well, you got affiliations with these guys, and is it going to affect you making us belt? I'm like, dude, I'm not in the wrestling business. I don't have I haven't been in the wrestling business.
You're a businessman.
I'm busy. I make belts. I don't have I have partners. I have friends, and I have business associates that are involved with different promotions and stuff. But that's their business, and my business is belts. And as long as I don't have a reason not to, I'll make belts for whoever asks. I mean, unless we've done prior business that went sour, and I'm just not happy and don't want to do business with you, then otherwise. So, I mean, but the kayfabe thing was always separate. I mean, kayfabe is actually now, funny enough, although people talk about kayfabe being dead, and I guess when, everything is just labeled as entertainment these days, it is. But the confidentiality, especially on anything undebuted these days, I mean, you're talking major problems for the stuff to leak out before they want it to. So I mean, in some sense, that's kayfabe's alive and well in that regard, because it's not just I don't want to pin that on WWE or anything. I mean, I deal with people. Man, I make belts for collectors sometimes that say, "Do me a favor, just don't put it on the internet." And it's not that there's anything wrong. Just some people are just private. They're like,
right.
Don't put my belt's got my name on it. Don't put mine on the internet. And I honor that. I don't care, man. Anybody that pays attention knows my website sometimes goes months without being updated. It's like, first of all, I don't have a lot of time to give the updates to my friend Javier to do it, and that's just my crazy schedule. But part of it is how much repetition do we need, because some of what I do is so repetitive, and on the other hand, some of it I absolutely can't show until the client tells me I can. So.
Because it's theirs. I mean,
Sure.
you're making it, but at the end of the day,
I work for them, and as long as there's not some unreasonable demand, I'm going to honor that. I would want them to honor it for me, and I think that the internet belt crowd, and there actually is an internet belt crowd, and I think that they kind of start taking for granted that everybody that orders a belt's part of that little scene or that club, and it's not really the way it is. I mean, yeah, a large number of them are. I encourage people to check out. I have a love-hate relationship with the internet, because I don't like as many good people as I meet through the internet. I also meet plenty of people who would smile to my face or meet me at a convention and glad hand me and sign my book, take a picture, whatever, be my buddy, and then the next thing I know, they're trashing something that I've done on the internet, or I hate this. It's not. I don't get offended if you don't like something I've done. I get offended when you attack the work, or when you attack my character or anything like that.
And social media gives it a whole new outlet.
It
and
does.
A whole new way to do it behind a person's back.
And the internet is it's a godsend in the sense that it's how I make my living. Without it, I truly could not have made the living that I've made with it. Because trust me, before the internet, the belt business was.
Did you do a lot of catalog stuff back in the day? You do, where you would send out the catalogs? And
I really didn't, because from the time that I got my foot in the door, I had that powerhouse Reggie library behind me where people knew the classic belts, and I never really had to go out of my way to print up a bunch of stuff. And
so you almost had a turnkey system in place.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, exactly. I didn't really have to, and that was one of the great things about being connected to Reggie. I remember Reggie. I'm only tying this in for the credibility thing. It's really not an answer to your question, but I remember Reggie taking me around in the late '90s at one of the CAC events, and I remember him introducing me to Killer Kowalski and Danny Hodge and Dory Funk Jr.
What a group of guys.
And because automatically that Reggie said, this is my guy, this is the guy that's working with. Well, nobody had ever worked with Reggie before, so it was instant credibility. I remember 2 years, I want to say 3 years later, running into Mr. Hodge again, into Danny Hodge again, just a tremendous gentleman. Thank God he is, because even right now he can still break somebody in half. You know, and we were at CAC, another CAC event, and he turned around. We were in they have this thing called the Bologna Blowout, where it's just like a deli meet, and everybody gets around and tells stories and that stuff. And Colorado Alley Club's just a great organization. We support it and believe in it. And anyway, we're in this line together, and I realize it's Danny Hodge in front of me. He turns around and he's like, "Oh, Dave, it's so good to see you again." And he shakes my hand, and for a minute my head blows up, and I think, duh, I got my name tag on. And so then I look down a second later, my name tag's facing me, and it turned around. So he remembered me, and that's. But again, it's not. I'm not putting myself over. I'm putting Reggie over. That was the credibility that Reggie attached to me automatically. So it's kind of cool when you hadn't seen him in a couple of years. Danny Hodge remembers who you are.
Yeah, and also too, though, I mean, it's not like you got into this to get rich or make a quick buck.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got passion for this business.
Yeah.
So I mean, how cool is that to be recognized by by your heroes, basically?
Yeah, and these days, to me that means more than most of the. I got to be careful what I say, but to me that meant something more than, this is not a flash in the pan guy. This is a guy that
He's here for the long haul.
He's here for the long haul. Stood the test of time. He's legit, man. Dude breaks his neck and then swims to the surface after he's had an accident, and he swims to the surface holding his neck in place. And to this day, if I'm not mistaken, can still squeeze a pair of pliers and break them. I don't know how I got off into Danny. I think I'm so impressed by that man and stuff, and then for him to be, it was humbling to, it was just a humbling experience for me.
Well, and you're a very humble guy. I mean, you really are. I mean, I see you wince when I'm talking about you being one of the premier belt makers in the world, and you are. And I think, and obviously, I said this off camera, and it's the truth. If the companies that you deal with, if they could go with somebody that would do it better, they would do it. I'm sure they're not saddled to you personally. You don't get Christmas cards, so they're with you because you are the premier guy.
Yeah, I think that some I make a connection with, some I don't. Wrestling these days is like anything else. It's kind of it's a corporate situation. So sometimes changes made are not personal. WWE actually still uses another belt maker because they actually found him on the internet at one point before they found me, and when he's got 20 years or 25 years in, and somebody's talking about him, then I'll mention his name. But I'll just say for now, he's a reputable guy. I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. It's certainly not on a big level. It's not I've developed relationships, for instance, in WWE that are friendships, or at least I consider them to be that way, with people I have to deal with and stuff, and we just kind of muddle through it together, and we get through it together, and the good and the bad, and when something goes right and when something goes wrong. But it's very much a corporate thing, and that goes for the MMA companies. It goes for the for the wrestling or sports entertainment companies, and it's not like as cool as that is, the coolest thing for me, and I'm still enough of a mark that I don't care. I mean, the coolest thing for me is if Steve Austin wants a belt, then to get the call and say, "Hey man, take care of this one, hook this up for me." It's not because of you develop relationships. It's not really even anymore about necessarily everything that a man like him has done. It's just you find out what a down-to-earth guy he is. When Jerry Lawler wants a belt made, and it's just rare, but I actually have a belt here now to deliver to Jerry. Jerry Lawler wants a belt made, I'm the guy. I've had a project going on for a while now for Buddy Landell that I've got to get delivered. And to me, these are guys that they're not scouring the internet looking for somebody. It's like, oh, we need a belt made. Let's call Dave Millican. So, and to me, that's a good feeling, because these are guys that not only that I respect their work and stuff, but these are guys that I like, and this is the guys that I want to
would associate with.
yeah,
You know.
yeah,
And for them to you appreciate their work,
sure,
but obviously in return that they appreciate your work.
yeah,
And that's cool. You know.
yeah,
And my next thing is explain, and you don't have to go into any elaborate details about a particular belt, but explain what goes into the not the making, but the creative process between you and a company like the WWE when it's time to make this belt. They don't just look at you and say I want a world title made, make it however you want.
One thing that's changed over the years is we retain the rights. And I say we because I was fortunate enough to get in there and kind of, I don't say open Reggie's eyes to it, but I was part of kind of a little collective group that kind of, maybe we did open Reggie's eyes and say, hey, we got to protect this stuff. And we formed a company to protect the copyrighted art of the classic Reggie Parks belts. Well, when the WWF breakup happened in '96, we retained the rights to the belts we've made for them, minus their logo, of course. And that served us very well. And it's why now we have licensing deals on those belts with different companies, is because we retain the rights to them. And one of the things that's changed is that WWE now not only retains the rights to their designs. Now, there's exceptions because they chose to bring back our classic Intercontinental design, which, if I don't forget, I'll tell you how that came about. They actually had the wrong belt maker make it because somebody in TV production ordered it, and it was, they ordered it from the wrong guy, and we had to call them on it and get it fixed. But it was an oversight. It's, again, nothing personal. It's corporate stuff. But what's changed is now they design their own belts, and if you like it, great. If you don't, well, I didn't design it. I just get tasked with making it. And so there's times that I'll even try to get them to change things just from using my experience and saying, I think it'd be better if we do it this way. And honestly, I get very few concessions that way. They're pretty set in how they want things done, but they retain the rights to that art. So the process really, like with a company like, with WWE in particular, they own the art. They create the art. We might have to do a little something with the engineering or modify it to make it work with our process. But they own the art, and they retain the rights to it. And it's strictly business, so that replica sales revenue goes to them. All kinds of merchandise, whether it's on a t-shirt or whether it's on an action figure, whatever, it goes to them. With other companies, a lot of what happens is sometimes they do bring a design to us, and if so, then they retain the rights to it. But my partner, Rico Mann, and I would be very remiss if I didn't talk about Rico. Rico came to us and contacted me, gosh, I honestly don't remember how many years ago now, and he contacted me, and just being very honest about it. He sent me some samples of artwork, and I was impressed. But I was so entrenched in the classic stuff. But MMA was starting to break out, and we needed custom art. And I told Ed Schumann, or my partner, mine and Reggie's partner at the time, and I said, this guy's got something. And so anyway, Rico started doing some design work for us. Now he's a full-blown business partner that handles the majority of our actual business. I mean, I'm doing the craftsmanship stuff, and I have to handle some of my own business with emails and phone calls like I talked about. But Rico handles landing a lot of our deals, handling a lot of our deals, and designs belts, and does artwork. So if it's something that Rico has designed, then we'll retain the art rights to it, unless it is done as a work for hire, which, if that's our agreement up front, and it's going to cost you more money, but if that's our agreement up front for you to own the design, then Rico's going to make more money on it, but he'll do something for you that's going to be yours, and if you put it on a t-shirt or replica belts or whatever, then that's your deal.
You don't know the royalties.
Right, that's your deal, but otherwise we retain art rights, because if we didn't, there's no retirement for what we do. There's no benefit.
Exactly.
There's no retirement. So if you're not looking out for yourself and making deals with the video game companies and toy companies, and you're just going to be one of those guys that hangs around near the bottom of this food chain. I got off on a little deal about about my wife being defensive and stuff about my work earlier, and I get asked a lot. I know it's said a lot. I think I never finished this thought while I'm going back to it. It's said a lot, you know, about my passion for this, and I do still have it. But trust me, when you have more belts due out in a week than you have days in the week, and you have a lot of time that has to go into each one, it's very much just a job at that point, and you want to see those things disappear. You want to see those belts go. And it's not that you don't have a passion for the work anymore or can't appreciate what you're doing, but I guess I did finish with that thought already. But man, trust me, I would love to get off work at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock and be done. You know.
Sometimes you just want to go home.
Yeah. Sometimes you want to go home, and I just wanted to finish that thought. So now that I've done that, we can go back to.
Well, you know, one of the things that we've touched on, you know, quite a bit, but I want to go ahead and iron the thought down is the internet. You know, how much has the internet changed? Because, you know, I mean, you've seen it start out, you know, very tiny, and now it's into this. You know, we can't get away from it.
Yeah. Right.
So, you know, how much has it changed your business? And I know it's changed it a great deal.
Immensely. It's the difference between making belts and doing something else on the side, or doing something else for a primary living and doing it for a living. That's what the difference is. The downside to it is, as you mentioned, social media. Everybody knows everything. Things that you, of course, it doesn't help when you have guys that are trying to get inside your engraving company as a customer and work against you from the inside, and then snap pictures of things that aren't supposed to be out, and whether they're even ever going to be used or not. I mean, people take pictures, and there's all kind of, you know, you never think of something like making championship belts as having, you know, this type of underhandedness to it or something. But I mean, it's very much just a business. But the internet, the good and the bad. I mean, I love it because it allows me to do what I do full time. Without the internet, how's somebody in Russia gonna know about me without the internet?
Exactly.
So I love it in that regard. I hate it in the regard of I don't like internet tough guys, and I don't like people that hide behind their keyboard and say things that they know they wouldn't say to your face.
Exactly. And you know, and you don't have to name drop anybody by any means, but there's a lot of companies out there that are ripping you off left and right, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, and how do you deal with that? Just
it's very frustrating because you reach a point where you do have to take a stand, and you know, we've definitely been counseled on it, and we're actually even currently building files on a couple of those guys, because that's the deal. You have to get enough to make it really worthwhile to pursue it. Otherwise, you're going to spend more money than you're going to make. Although I did get hot enough to tell one guy in the past year, I said, you know, I reached a point with you where I'd spend 10 grand to make 500 back, just to make an example.
and sometimes all it takes is one example. Yeah.
Simple as that. Absolutely.
And we're talking about copyright issues, right?
Yeah, you're talking about the fact that you know, this is what we do, and if you're still, it's, you know, piracy is everywhere, bootlegging's everywhere. I mean, you see it on every time you put in a movie, you see the piracy thing, and it's everywhere, man. I mean, it's not just, it's certainly not just belts. I mean, it's everything. As long as there's been things, as long as there's been currency and there's been things that were worth money, there's been people bootlegging and counterfeiting it.
Absolutely.
And it's no different now. It's just it gets frustrating enough sometimes that it gets distracting, and I don't like for anything. I don't have time to be distracted. And that was kind of the point when I told the guy I'd spend 10 grand to make 500 back on you right now, just as an example. And it's not really trying to be a power play. It's just, it goes back to exactly what you said, and that is that sometimes all it takes is one example, and that will last a long time. And by and large, some of these guys will the ones that won't back off are the international ones, because they know that international legal remedies are just getting some of these different governments to you're going to spend a ridiculous amount. You're going to spend more money than you're going to make, and you can only do that for so long. I don't care what business you're in. You're not going to stay in business long if you're spending more money than you're making. And so, you know, you got to pick your battles. But some of these guys that are even considered by some people to be reputable have started ripping us off. I've seen Winged Eagle rip-offs in the past year. that I'm not happy about. I've seen different things like that I'm not happy about, and calling it your take on a classic design don't make it right.
No, and it doesn't make it yours either.
And that's absolutely right. So that kind of stuff. Very, very frustrating and very distracting from the job at hand. And you guys were out with me in the shop and saw a little bit about, saw what I'm dealing with as far as workload. You got
an amazing workload.
And that's just what's going out this week. And I don't have time to be distracted.
And a lot of that was company stuff too. It wasn't the actual customer base side.
Yeah, we had everything from there was some licensed collector belts out there. Everything from those to WWE to ISKA kickboxing. So I mean, it's all over the place. All over, a wide array of work.
And there's an influx too that I've noticed, and I'm in no way an expert, but I've noticed an influx of a lot of Pakistan plates and a lot of
that's
that
by and large the
overseas
international stuff I was talking about, and they'll rip anything off and they don't care. What are you gonna do? What we can do, but again, you got to pick your battles so that you don't spend more money than you're making back, and that's what the lawyers will tell you is pick your battles, because if the guy's made 3 of these belts and he profited $1,000, well, you're going to pay me more than $1,000.
Well, exactly.
To get it going. And so, but the package, we can't. While it's hard to go after them, it's not that hard to go after the people over here that are distributing it or finishing. They'll sell belt plates over here, and then people put it on, for the most part, crappy leather, and you end up with a crappy belt. And I mean, there's rip-offs of a lot of our stuff that way. But again, it goes back to that. If you have no pride in your, I don't worry. Serious collectors aren't going to do that stuff. That's only somebody that's a bottom feeder anyway. That's just I guess get a little harsh about it, but I mean that's just somebody that's never going to be a serious collector anyway. There's no pride in what they do. There's no pride in what they they don't have any pride in their collection. They want to walk around like an idiot with a belt on their shoulder. And I shouldn't say that, because there are good fans that do that too. But I mean I think it's just the heat that it brings out in me when these guys that they just want something shiny on their shoulder that looks like whether it's a TV belt or a whatever the belt is.
They usually make up some kind of story that goes along with
it. Absolutely. If you're going to buy that kind of garbage, then you got to tell them what kind of story goes with it.
Well, and I think of it almost, what you're talking about. I think of it, almost in terms of motorcycles. You got the Harley Davidson that you're going to spend a lot more money for. But at the end of the day, you can turn it 5 years later and almost get the same value, if not a little bit more out of it. Whereas the Honda, you buy a Honda motorcycle and you give 15 for it, you may be lucky to sell it for 6.
Absolutely.
And that's what your belts are.
Most of our stuff, even in this terrible economy, most of our stuff holds up on resale. It's certainly affected it. I won't say that it hasn't. It's affected everything, and it's certainly affected resale even on our belts. But there are certain ones that are sought after by collectors that'll hold their value. As long as you're taking care of it, it'll hold its value and very well, and you'll get most, if not all. And sometimes just because the waiting, the wait is so bad, because sometimes, man, I got 75, 100 belts in the works, and people say, how is that even possible? When you're dealing with the whole world, trust me, it's possible.
And start to finish, what are we? And I know there's more intricate belt designs, but your average belt that you make the most, if you put in your time, the hours wise, what are we talking about?
We used to turn these things around. 6 or 8 weeks, and then that's taking time for all the engraving and the polishing and the plating and the leather and the paint and whatever. But these days everything is just. It's actually caused the companies have caused a backup. Because the companies have millions of dollars on the line with these events, and wrestling, MMA, whatever it is, you got to have the belts delivered for these events, and sometimes they pay for the right to do it, but they'll put a deadline out on you, and then the belt doesn't even show up. But it doesn't matter; it's your responsibility to get it there, because.
And obviously they go to the front of the list. Right?
They have to.
They have to.
And I've had people say, well, my money's as good as theirs. Well, your money's as good as theirs, but the odds that you paid me as much as they did are pretty slim.
Or the odds that you're going to be doing the volume that they're going to be doing with you.
Right.
It's got to be taken into consideration.
Absolutely.
And as far as with you know, the belts that you have out and stuff. You know, what's the one that you've done? And we're jumping way ahead, but what's the one that you've done that is just your most favorite? Your number one belt that you've been a part of?
I think that is the. I think that's the question I probably asked the most, and it's kind of like asking me to pick a favorite kid. You know, I don't know that I actually have a favorite that I've done. And this goes back as a tribute to Reggie. I think my favorites that I've done are not necessarily what's been out there for the companies, as much as I mean we're proud of a lot of the work, you know, proud of all the work we put out. We're you know, really proud of a lot of it. But you know, to me, I'll go back to that. The fact that especially being a Memphis guy, the fact that Jerry Lawler said, "Hey man, you make me a unified belt, or you make me a Southern heavyweight belt, or that Steve Austin comes to you and says, hey man, remember that belt I had in '92? Can you do that one?" I don't think it's as much about marking out, oh look what I made a belt for. It's just a genuine admiration, and the fact that it's a full circle thing for me. You know, while you know Steve doesn't quite go back that far because he and I are close in age, but the Jerry Lawlers and the Buddy Landells and these guys, you know, made belts for Bill Dundee and stuff like that. I mean, it's just a full circle thing for me, and I'm more proud of those than I think on a personal level. And I'm proud of all of it, and it's cool to know that on any given night, if there's wrestling on TV, your work's going to be on TV, or you know, if there's MMA on TV, then probably your work's going to be on TV. It's certainly a very, very cool thing. Very cool to walk into a store and be able to walk over to the toy department and see a belt that you know that you made the real one or something like that. As cool as all that stuff is, I still don't think it gets any better for me than my favorite belts are the ones that these guys that I have so much respect for come to me and have me make for them. Just the fact they even want one, and not just that they have me make it, but the fact that they even care enough about the history to want to have one. Because you know, most of these guys are not guys that are they're not a mark on any level really, other than the fact that maybe some, you know, well I say that, and as it's often repeated in the wrestling business, we're all marked for something, or we wouldn't be doing it. But you know, I can assure you. I used to go back and use the King for an example. I can assure you, Jerry Lawler's not a belt mark in general, but it's just things that he has an appreciation for that he would like to have, and you know, when he comes to me, get those made. So I mean, you know, that to me, and I don't want to dance around your question, but that truly is the answer. It's just as cool as it is to, and as proud as I am of the stuff that you'll see on TV on Monday night or Friday night. You know, to me, the best part of it is knowing that those guys, when they want something, aren't scouring the internet. They're going to come back and have me make whatever it is that they want.
Well, and we talked a little bit too, you know, about your waiting list, and ultimately, that's what brings a lot of the value. Obviously, they're done, you know, with a hell of a lot of quality, but you know, you've got a belt.
There are guys that make a good living reselling my belts, or not just my belts. To be fair about it, not just my belts, belts in general, because but probably more so mine because the waiting list is so bad, and if they already have them, they can move them. I tell people all the time, if the wait is an issue for you, and I understand what it is, that's a lot of money to wait a long time for something. I always tell them two things, or at least two things. First of all, if you take care of it, there's no reason it won't last you a lifetime. And I also tell them, if the wait is a problem for you, I completely understand, but this is not for you. Go find one secondhand. Go to one of these guys. I don't go out of the way necessarily to endorse somebody else's business ventures, but I mean, by all means, if this is not for you, don't do it. I got all I can handle, man. I'm not out there begging for anybody's money, and I don't want anybody's money bad enough to mislead them, and I didn't need when I didn't have any money. So you know, if the wait's not for you and you can't handle it, I certainly understand it. It's a lot of money. It's a high-end product to wait a long time for. But you know, that's something too that when you do get it, then you can say, yeah, I had to wait years for this thing. And I mean, some people that say, well, that doesn't add any value to it to me, but other people have an appreciation for it.
Well, and you can't really give a guarantee either, can you? When you're dealing with the customer, you know, you can maybe give them a basic time frame.
I back myself into a corner with it, and I'm backing away from that all the time because the companies keep me very, very busy. And that's something else too. It's like, well, no new belts are showing up on TV.
That's not.
You have no idea. I make belts sometimes that never see the light of day. And it's not because I did anything wrong. It's just because of they change your mind.
Well, storyline maybe changed and
Change your mind. You know, that's not, that's part of it. I had belts in my shop that were never finished, and these weren't out belts. These were company belts that did. A couple of MMA companies, smaller MMA companies, went out of business before all their belts were made, and they never came. I mean.
Oh yeah.
I guess that doesn't really factor into the wait time. But I mean, I'm talking these were relatively quick turnarounds, and the companies didn't last long enough to get them, and they never came back. They didn't come back and say, hey, we still at least want that stuff, and there's no place to send it because they don't even have an office space anymore.
Oh wow.
I mean, that's just the way it goes. But I mean, there's always something. There's always I've WWE in particular, and I won't go into specifics because I don't necessarily know they would want me to. But I've done everything from make belts to them that haven't seen the light of day to modified replicas from. But again, it falls under that umbrella of that's what they're paying me to do, and that's what they pay more money than the average person or than any individual is going to pay. They pay for the right to do that, and at the end of the day, this is my living. It's how and I don't want to slight anybody, but this is how I make my living, and keeping those companies happy is important. It's not it has to be done.
And one of the things too that just amazes me is not only are you making the belts, but they're showing up. Like we talked about, they're showing up on action figures.
Yeah.
And the video games. That's something that I didn't know about, and I guess it started last year. I mean, you actually, your products are put into the games, and it says, Dave Millican, Reggie Parks.
Yeah.
And that's one of the. Hell, my son was the one that pointed that out to me just the other day.
Yeah. It's actually been a long time coming. It's something that really should have been done, and what we were able to do was get a retro deal to kind of. A deal we were happy with that retroed back for the years that we really weren't compensated for it. Very, very good. And it's kind of cool too. It's just kind of cool.
Yeah,
somebody before I'd ever even seen it, and I got copies of the game as part of our deal and stuff. But before I'd ever even seen it, somebody my wife works with, that's a video game guy, stopped her at work and said, "Hey, I saw your husband's name on I saw your name on the video game." So yeah, that's just kind of cool. The business aspect of it's better than that, but it's kind of cool. Just
it just shows the sign of the times.
It's out there forever in the video game stores. It'll be circulated around and all that stuff. And depending on what their business does going forward, we're going to have more deals like that.
Well, and to get off of the belts just for a little bit, you've also run some shows and done a little bit of promoting and stuff, and I want you to talk a little bit about that. There's a lot of people that don't know about that.
When I was coming out of corrections, I worked in corrections 5 years and made it as high as you can go in the uniforms anyway, without starting to wear a suit and tie, without wearing a tie, without wearing a suit and tie. I made it as high as I could go in the corrections field I was in, and had really just kind of developed a disdain for the administration part of that more than I never really had a problem dealing with inmates. Anyway, as I was coming out of that, I had a couple of guys I had met at these independent shows that were breaking away from one little independent group and wanting to form their own, and they wanted me to start up with them. And they knew that just by talking to me that I really could, I could book a show. And that's really was kind of the weak point with them. They could do a lot of other stuff, but they really couldn't properly book a show. Now I say properly, and God knows that looking back, I wish I knew then what I know now. But it's not like I was super. I was just right place, right time. And I told them. And again, something that I think is probably the Jerry Jarrett approach, that he took would take these days. I think, when it comes to any kind of startup, I'll give you my knowledge, if you will. I won't give you my money. we'll start. I won't take any pay until you guys have recouped what you've invested to get us going. The minute we turn a profit, I'll start taking, then then I'll get paid. But in the meantime, I'm not helping you with startup money, but I will help you by booking the shows, and I'll be an equal partner. And so that was just kind of our deal, and I did that, and it worked out good. And we did did some, for around here, we did good houses. Started off really, really weak, of course, probably 50 people or less at the first show. The second show was probably 75 to 100, and you just build it and you build it. And my deal was to build local guys. I wanted to be at a point where I could bring in the established Memphis area stars and stuff, and we didn't really reach that point. But my deal was just to build. I wanted to prove you could build local guys, and that's what we did. And I was real proud of it. I mean, you're talking. I don't remember exactly what year started. It was 90s stuff, and then by 98, 99, I was out of it. I had sold. We sold out to a guy that wanted to kind of turn into a hardcore thing, which I had no real use for. And he turned it into something. But I like the guy. He'd actually previously worked for us as a wrestler, as a worker. And he turned it into something. KAW, Kick-Ass Wrestling. And from there, Jerry Lawler had kind of had a little falling out with Randy Hales. Randy Hales was running Power Pro Wrestling in Memphis, and at the time, and so Jerry was looking. He wanted to do kind of prove a point, I think, or whatever. And I don't really want to say too much about that either way. I like Jerry, I like Randy, and I
Sure.
know what I mean. But anyway, he called this guy who was Terry Golden, and he said, I want to come, I think we can work something out, because Terry had TV also, and I think we can work something out. So he said, but I'm not working for a company that's called that, so they changed the name up to Memphis Championship Wrestling, and ultimately it all came back together, and they worked together. But really, that's when I got out of it. I got out of it and sold out to them, and then Terry, thanks to, I think, Jerry's, not I think, it was because of Jerry joining. Jerry actually brought it WWE developmental over, and it made it WWE developmental territory, which, I don't want to take credit for that, but it was kind of cool to know that was my old ring and my setup and stuff, and the base of a lot of my base guys.
A lot of your vision.
Yeah, it turned into that. I don't take credit for it. I give, that was all that Jerry brought it over. Without Jerry joining the company, that wouldn't have happened. I don't have any illusions about that. But it was kind of cool. And by then, I was just, I was out of it. If Terry, the guy, Terry Golden, Terry Story, Russell's Terry Golden, that was, when he had he would kind of come to me for advice sometimes, and sometimes he used it, and sometimes he didn't. But that was just kind of my role then. I was out of it. But we had a good little run. I enjoyed it. Enjoyed what I get. It doesn't take much to scratch that itch, though. Like if I get kind of itchy to be around the wrestling business again, I can usually go hang out at a show for a night and get it right back out of my system.
Exactly, and not have to pay all the money,
and not have to deal with it. It's funny, one of the things, and I mentioned him a couple of times just because I think he's just an awesome guy. But one of the things that I told Steve Austin was like, man sat at the very top of this business, and one reason I got out of the level of the wrestling business I was in was I was dealing with egos bigger than his. I was dealing with guys that never cracked mid card on an indie card that had more of an attitude, bigger ego than a guy like Legendary. True, that word's bounced around like crazy and so undeserved in most cases, but a true legend like Steve Austin, much more down to earth guy.
All right, Dave. One of the things that was brought up and that I thought of, when we first decided we was going to do this project, everybody said, you're going to have to get him to show you some stuff. We want to see some toys. We want some show and tell time. And, I'm looking around this office,
not just here because I'm such a charming, entertaining guy, right?
And that's what, hopefully that's what they'll buy it for, but they're going to stay for the toys, So, I want you to show some of the things that you've got going on, and some of the things that you've done, and just kind of go through.
Well, you guys have seen out in the shop, there's a whole bunch more than this, but I just grabbed a couple things to bring back here to the office. They're going out in the coming week, like this gigantic monster here is an ISKA super welterweight kickboxing belt, and we were joking about the design because the customer wanted just a gigantic
That is gorgeous.
belt, and he got it. If this is a super welterweight, the heavyweight's going to be enormous, right?
So, better be a big guy.
So yeah, so that's just that's one of the things. And layered jeweled monster, just very, very impressive, and I think will serve its purpose. And one more of the current things we got going on here. Not giving away a new design, the same designs on TV every week, but this is just another of the WWE World Heavyweight Championship belts. Just finished that. That's going to be going out this week. So that's just something.
Wow.
That's, I guess as long as they really seem to want to stay with this traditional design, and so far, you know, it's held on for a long time. I guess even our different versions and variations that we have anyway. So anyway, it's still around, and be showing up on TV pretty soon, I guess. From that, you know, one of the cool things about helping these different guys that I'm friends with, and I'm of course a collector myself, and some of the stuff that I help other people get, is I still have, you know, I got friends and we just kind of mix and match and stuff. Hey, let me see that belt and stuff. So, you know, this is one that actually a lot of the what we call the belt marks will recognize this. This is the mid '80s World Championship Wrestling TBS TV belt. It was worn by Ronnie Garvin and Bob Roop and Jake Roberts, and so I mean, you know, it's just kind of one of those cool belts that classic is. This is one of the classic, what I call classic Reggie belts, and so just, you know, it's just having this thing around is pretty cool. So it's signed on the back, I think, by Ronnie Garvin and then by Jake the Snake Roberts.
Oh, that's awesome.
What we got here is actually a Central States Tag Team belt, and this belt has kind of a cool story, because when they retired it from just being a Central States Tag Team belt, I think it was I want to say it was a guy named Joel Deaton. Joel Deaton. What was the game? Was it Thunderfoots? Anyway, they left with the belts, and somewhere along the way, this thing ended up in Texas being used as a global television belt, and also used on independent shows as the Georgia heavyweight belt. So this thing has been around. Well, I think one of the coolest things about this belt for fans of more current stuff is that it would have been one of possibly the first, and definitely one of the first belts that Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty ever wore.
Oh wow, what a history lesson
Yeah,
that is.
so that's kind of a cool thing. I've had that thing for years and had it for a long time. Over here, and this was actually a much newer, nicer looking belt, national tag team title belt, and then a little something happened to it called the Road Warriors. And they treated their belts about like they treated their opponents. So, you know, this is just one of those historical, I mean, you know, for all the dings, this is one that you don't really have to do anything to.
No, and you wouldn't want to. Why?
Yeah,
That is awesome.
This is it. This is, and it's funny because, you know, the two belts, like I always know that the one that had this replaced medallion, they knocked these medallions out, and this medallion, I always recognize this. It's funny because, you know, tag teams generally just grab a belt when it's over. I don't think they necessarily had a belt, but for some reason this was always Hawk's belt. I could always tell when you see them posed with pictures and stuff. Look for this little medallion that is not original to the belt, and you'll see that this was Hawk's belt. And something else Hawk tended to do is, this plate was broken during they still had the belt for quite a while, you know, when this plate was broken. So a lot of times in photo shoots, Hawk would be turned this way.
Oh, okay.
And I'm surprised that he even cared, but I've seen him in enough poses where he and Adam were posing together where he's turned that way that it's not a coincidence. So I'm surprised that he would even care. Didn't strike me as the kind of guy that would have cared, but he tended to pose turned that way, and that might have been the photographers doing more than Hawks. I really don't know. I just know that that's that's kind of how it ended up a lot of times. But that's just some of the stuff that it varies week to week what I got laying around here, and sometimes it's new WWE stuff, and sometimes it's classic stuff. And as you guys know from touring my shop out there, there's a little bit of everything around there, a little bit of everything in here. You know, I talk about my office is obviously I have to come back here for work and keep up with my business stuff, but I've surrounded myself with you know, all kinds of things that it's kind of like I'm just my wife says it all the time, and I certainly can't deny it. I'm just a big kid anyway, so I got everything back here that reminds me of the days that, you know, my childhood and the stuff that I enjoyed, and it's splashed in with a little bit of what I do now, some of the current stuff. But you know, by and large, really, I come back here, and if I'm deep in thought about something, I'm looking around and I'm seeing stuff that meant something to me and was part of my love for this in the first place.
Well, and one of the coolest things in your office is something that we've had a shot of the entire time over your right shoulder. Is that knee brace right there, and I'd like for you to talk about that. That is absolutely phenomenal.
You know, and I've talked about him quite a bit, just because that's just what kind of guy he is. I mean, he's just an awesome guy. This is a Don Joy knee brace that was worn by Steve Austin. He started off with one, and then he ended up wearing two. And Steve's just such a great guy. And there's times that, I mean, he sent me T-shirts and things like that. And he told me last summer we were talking, and he said, I got something coming your way. So make sure, he said, I got your address, right? And I'm like, yeah, you should have it. And I said, but if you're going to send me something cool, I'll make sure you got it. And we're joking around. And, so anyway, a week goes by and nothing shows up. I kind of put it out of my mind. Steve's a busy guy, and I think, yeah, whatever it is, he forgot about it. He'll get around to it sometime. Again, I'm thinking it's a T-shirt or something. So I'm out one day running some errands, and I come home, and my daughter says, Dad, you got a box sitting in your office chair. And I said, okay. I'm figuring it's something from my plater or something like that. And I come back here, and box looks like that's not belt plates, and something's rattling around in it. I mean, it's typical Steve Austin stuff. There was no reason to pack it real nice and neat and stuff, you know, this old beat up, battle-worn piece of gear. So anyway, that's what it was. And along with a note that I actually am going to frame, and I get somebody to build me a box for it. The letter that came with it means as much to me as the knee brace, and he's just. I can't say enough about what a genuine guy he is, and he's the real thing. He's what you see is what you get. If he likes you, you'll know it, and if he doesn't, then you know that too. He's the real deal, 100%. It's got to be somebody that I've gotten to be friends with. And I first met Steve, and I don't remember if it would have been 90 or 91. He was in Memphis being managed by Jamie Dundee, and we go back to talking about the earlier days of my belts, and I had a belt back there, and I was talking to Jamie about it, and to show you that, I mean, he's the same guy all along. He said he's just over propped up against the wall, and I'd never even spoken to him, and he said, let me see that, and he looks at it and checks out the belt I'm showing. He said, that's pretty good work, son. and I reminded him of that. Not that I mean, Steve met a million people, know that he remember, but I said, you know, some things never change, and he's still the same. He's still the same guy. But I just think that's a testament to him. Man set at the very, very top of this business, and as I like to say, I mean, yeah, well, the injuries and lingering and stuff, but one more good run if he wanted to have it. As I like to say, instead of the snap of a finger or the breaking of a glass, shattering of a glass, it could happen all over again. I mean, that's just
Absolutely.
They just don't get to be any better than that. And even as big of a fan as I am, and as much respect as I've got for him on a professional level, on a personal level, he's even better. He's just and something like this proves it. Who does something like this? And he even told me, he said, I didn't personalize this in case you want to, he knows how I do my memorabilia and how the collectors do. And he told me in a note, he said, I didn't personalize this in case you want to flip it down the line. But if you ever see another one out there, it's a fake because I've got all the rest of them. And, you know, I got a lot of stuff, and I've got things that I've traded for, I've got things I paid for, but very, very few things that somebody, especially somebody the magnitude of Steve Austin, just given me. And this is something that I think he probably knew it, but it's not going anywhere.
That is awesome. It's such a piece of history, really.
Yeah, really battle gear. And we were laughing too. I tell you, let me finish over this. We were laughing when I called to tell him thanks. We were laughing about it, and I said, do you know how absurd it is if you don't get it, if you don't understand what it really is, how absurd it is to talk about framing a knee brace? And he said, yeah, I guess that really, if you didn't understand it, you know, if you didn't know what it was and understand what kind of battle gear it was, I guess that would be a pretty odd conversation to an outsider.
Well, and you also, you know, you talk about wrestling being wrestling. You got a couple books there, a couple planners that you showed me.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that, I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, this is just some of the stuff outside of belts that I believe, you know, I just love this stuff, and I mean, I believe it's some of the coolest stuff I've got. This is, and there's actually two of them. There's 82 and 1982, 1983. These are Jad Katkus, and there's a Fritz von Erich, of course. These are his day planners that have the, I probably can't get that tight on it, but I mean, you got every town, you got how much the house drew, and you got the talent that was booked on it. And if his boys weren't booked on it, you've got where they were booked at notated at the bottom, so that he could keep up with where his boys were at, you know, were booked on any given day. And so, you know, it's just tremendous. That's the kind of stuff I'm into that don't have anything to do with belts, and the stuff that I enjoy, and it's just collecting stuff like this. And I don't really have a lot of free time, but sometimes if I'm trying to unwind, or I even took them, my wife and I take an anniversary trip every year, and I took them from my downtime, and I sat in the Florida sunshine flipping through Fritz von Erich's day planners. So,
you know, it don't get any cooler than that.
Yeah, for me that's a vacation. But I've got some other really, really cool stuff. A lot more stuff like that. So much that we could fill up a whole video just on looking at that.
Oh, I'm sure. And one more thing that I want to talk about is a book that I can't recommend enough, and that's your 10 Pounds of Gold.
Yeah, I wish I could take more credit for it. You know, my buddy Dick Bourne, this is the second edition of the 10 Pounds of Gold. The first one was something that, what we did was we had an opportunity to photograph the actual NWA World Heavyweight Belt. And I've made countless copies of it. I've made copies that have been used in the ring. I've made all kinds of versions of it. But this was about the original one, the real one. And this is pretty much everything you want to know, and some stuff that you probably couldn't even care less. It's so jam-packed with stuff, and I'm not just putting the book over. I'm putting over the efforts of my buddy Dick Bourne, who has just poured his heart and soul into this thing. I did take a lot of the pictures. I provided a lot of the information, stuff that I already knew about the belt. I had an opportunity to hold the belt a few times and take pictures of it and stuff, but never on this level. We actually spent a day, hours and hours, photographing every aspect of the belt, and so I really contributed more of the information. Dick did all the writing and deserves all the credit for that. But anyway, that's our baby right there. We're proud of it. It's been out for a few years now. This version just came out last year. It's the revised edition. Much more information, and a much more affordable one. The first one, self-published books are expensive, and we actually weren't making hardly anything on each book. The first one was a hardcover edition, but it was a lot more expensive. This has a lot more in it, and is a lot more affordable. And you just check out 10poundsofgold.com, and you can find out everything you want to know. This one's actually going home with the We're Legends guys, but that's
absolutely. And those fans, can they also get them from your website? You got them on there?
There's a link on the site that just leads you to the 10 Pounds of Gold site, and you know, takes care of that business there. But yeah, absolutely, you can go to my website, which is DaveMillicanBelts.com. Also, you can get there, exact same website. For anybody that has trouble with Millican, there's 2 L's, but you can just go aceofbelts.com, same site. And there's a link at the top for the 10 pounds of gold site.
And at the end of this DVD, you will be seeing all these links that we're talking about. So they'll be right in front of you, and you can go to them right from there.
Very cool.
You know, Dave, you've been fantastic, and I want to wind this down with, you know, you are such a professional and such a businessman. You know, when it's all said and done, you know, you're making pieces of history, whether you realize it or not. I know you're smart enough to realize that. You know, you're almost making a legacy, and when it's all said and done, you know, this is your legacy. How do you want to be remembered? How do you want to be remembered as far as, you know, with your work?
You know, I said something earlier that I think is probably maybe not even the answer that somebody would expect to that question, but much more than anything any work that I've done, or when I asked Reggie why was I the guy that he opened that door for, and I said, you know, why was attached his credibility to him, and he said something along the lines of, because I'm not going to be around forever, and I want somebody that's honest and fair to continue on this business and have the pride in their work. I think that's good enough for me, man. I think that's all that I'm looking for. You know, an honest guy that you know, an honest guy that just did the best he could, and I think that's really all I'm looking for. That's good enough for me. It's not for any individual belt, or did he do this for this company that was on TV, or did he have any great champions for the belt, or whatever. I mean, I think really more than any of that stuff, it's just a guy that put out the best product that he could and was honest and fair, and you know, that's it for me, man. That's good enough for me. That's one of my uncles used to tell me, it's just one of those old Southern simple things, but it stands the test of time. I remember he was just one of these guys that would just sit around and reel off stuff like this, but he just said, son, when you don't have anything else, you got your name. Don't ever mess your name up. And that's what I've always tried to do, is just be, if I'm remembered that way and I've got a good name, that's good enough for me.
And I think I can actually speak for Reggie Parks on this. You've carried the torch very well, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. You're absolutely fantastic.
My
And
pleasure.
I wish you all the luck and everything from here on out.
Thank you.